Hey, hey, friends. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you're very welcome here in our humble abode on Isla Mujeres. I am accompanied by my brother in arms, my fellow intellectual terrorist, Santos Bonacci, the godfather of syncretism. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
We've had a delightful day, and we've been with this lot. Do you recognize him? Do you recognize him? Sasha Cobra. So all of her fan base out there. Hey guys, you've got a live audience out there.
Oh,
Here we go. I'm just doing the courtesy of showing you faces here. So we have a bit of an audience here in the house. I'm going to do that again. Wait, there you go. Do a little reverse pirouette, and we can now begin. And I'm going to bring in our special guest, David Sereda. Hi, David.
hi, Sasha. Hi, Santos. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here today, and a lot of exciting things have happened since Jimmy Blanchette and I have done these transmissions to the planets and the stars. There's just so much wonderful, communication happening. I mean, it was actually the father of radio is Nikola Tesla. It actually demonstrated radio, the first radio at Chicago World's Fair in 1893. And he was soon joined by a mystic named Sir Oliver Lodge. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on June 21st, 1943, that Tesla, Lodge, and Stone were the true fathers of radio. And that Marconi, whatever he did, he was using Tesla's patents to broadcast across the Atlantic. But the reason I bring up Tesla and Stone is, Sir Oliver Lodge and Stone, is that Tesla, you have to understand, when radio was first born on this planet, this is in the late 1800s, there's no known transmissions or receptions of radio signals from outer space or in the interplanetary medium. And Tesla actually detected what appeared to be intelligent radio signals coming from either Venus or Mars. And it doesn't seem like he completely made up his mind in the end. But the messages were numerical sequences. They were numbers that were coherent and made sense. And what Jimmy Blanchette has started on his own, actually, is using a biblical sacred geometry measured massive antenna that he keeps in the southern United States desert. And we've been sending very coherent messages one at a time to the sun, the planet Mercury and Venus, and we did 2 tests to Jupiter and Saturn. The responses happen within days, and they're actually phenomenal. But I want to talk first about our last transmission we did with you, Sasha, and we sent a transmission to Venus, and we brought in your live audience, and something was happening during the transmission, and that is that these little handheld radios, basically we sent out a transmission at 432 million hertz, which is 432 megahertz, and 432 previously demonstrated is an absolute perfect A-note harmonic. Jimmy and I also demonstrated that we received this download in our first transmission, which was last August the 8th, which was a signal sent at 250,000 watts, bounced off the moon and hit the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And we demonstrated that the Great Pyramid of Egypt received an activation and emitted a huge energy aura, which we detected with cameras stationed in Cairo. So what happens is normally Jimmy Blanchette has created a worldwide following. Well, people tune these little handheld radios to this sacred 144.1 megahertz. And what they do is they hold the call button down while a series of numerical meaning frequencies as numbers. So if I say 432 hertz, that's a number, but it's also a number of waves per second. And it happens to be an audible tone. So Jimmy has students with a really simple, just playing an MP3 in their phone, holding the call button down, and they would release the radio. These little chirps start coming back into the radio. And those chirps, when spectral analyzed, represent numbers and codes, not binary, not Morse code, but actually numbers and codes. And so when we did our last transmission, Sacha, something was happening on my radio at 432 megahertz, which is just like what happens on all the radios he has all over the world at 144.1 megahertz. And that's not supposed to happen, because nothing happens at 432 megahertz when you're sitting in the middle of nowhere. So what's happened this week is, there's no other way to explain this, but it appears we've opened a portal between Venus and Earth. And I'm going to play a little video here that will demonstrate what's actually happened throughout the week here. Is if I turn my radio on in the house, and I left my radio on all last night while I was sleeping to see if there would be any phenomenon at 432 megahertz, and it was perfectly quiet all night. But in the morning, watch what happens when I go to share screen here just for a second, and
yeah,
you can see. Can you see my YouTube channel here?
No, I'm waiting for you to share screen. When you share screen, I will be able to let you in from the studio here.
I just did. Okay. I see. Allow. Oh, select window or screen. It says. Oh, that's weird.
At the very bottom, next to camera, mic, and invite, there's share button.
Yeah, I did that. So what you got to do is go. Oh, it looks like you have to allow me on your end. So share screen. And can you see a video that I'm about to play or not?
Nothing's coming up yet. Normally it comes into the back.
Oh, sometimes there's a delay. There is a delay.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to do a tap dance or juggle. You got your harmonica with me? Okay, well, if the worst comes to the worst. Actually, it was very dope what you did earlier. I love that.
Okay, let's just say that's not working. I can just talk about what's happening. So what happens is, the second I walk my radio into the location where we did the Venus transmission, my radio just starts chirping at 432 megahertz, just like a bird, just like chip, 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 chip. Now, if I walk outside of a radius of about 40 feet, it stops. That's not how radios work. Then I walk back in and it starts chirping again. So I filmed this, and I checked on what's called a frequency analyzer what those chirps are, and they're just sending numbers and code.
Okay. David, I've got your. Oh, sorry, it's Debbie. Come on, I thought that was your mute your microphone. Okay, I thought that was your screen coming in, but it's not. It's just our Steadicam. So sorry. Do carry on.
Okay, so what this means is, see, the way a radio works is if you're driving down the highway and you tune your radio to 92.1 FM, which means frequency modulation. AM means amplitude modulation. And AM radio signals are usually lower in frequency than FM signals, right? But if we're all tuning in to that number, we're actually biologically, our nervous systems are also tuned to that number. I actually did an experiment that proves this. That's why in the 70s and the 60s, when you turned on the radio, it was really scratchy. You got this kind of feeling on top of the music. It's actually because your antenna in your car was vibrating at that frequency and receiving at that frequency. So your nervous system, because your spine is calcium, which is a metal, which is a conductor, like an antenna, your whole body is actually vibrating at that frequency. So what we were doing with the transmission the other night with your guests is we were demonstrating that because we were all together, we were all actually at 432 megahertz. We actually were. Right. So we sent this signal out, which was a series of, first it was a series of tones, a series of Venus's actual resonant frequencies. There were 7 octaves based on the circumference of Venus at the equator. And then we sent a series of pictograms. One was a pictogram message. Another was a pictogram of my little daughter's eyes, just her eyes, showing the eyes of a child. And then there was a vocal message from myself saying to help, to send help to planet Earth because we've been hijacked by evil lords. And then you could hear the voices of my children just saying, calling all angels, and we called upon the archangel Gabriel and Michael. And then there was a song, a vocal song from my wife. So that's what is contained in a transmission. But also because your nervous system as participants is being tuned, because you're simultaneously tuning in, you're actually tuning to the frequency of the broadcast. What you're thinking and what you're intentionalizing during a broadcast is actually being sent to the planet Venus. And so what I've discovered that's happened in the last couple of days since we did this is it doesn't matter when I walk in this building. If I turn on my radio at 432 megahertz, it's usually chirping a message. And I mean, I know a lot about radio. I calculate thousands and thousands of frequencies for the last 15 years, and I understand wavelengths and frequencies very, very well. But I believe what Nikola Tesla actually discovered, the father of radio, is there are intelligences, you may call them gods or goddesses or whatever you want, on most of the 9 planets we're surrounded by. And in fact, the very first, I started speaking in UFO conferences, over 20 years ago. And I remember this guy giving this whole presentation about the Venus conspiracy, which is, Venus is on one side of us, Mars is on the other, right? They're our closest neighbors. And you're going to see this in the book of Revelation in 22:16, Jesus refers to himself as the bright and morning star, which is Venus. Venus is the bright and morning star. And in Dante's visions, Venus is the 3rd level of the 9 levels of heaven, hence 9 levels of heaven, hence 9 planetary spheres. If you count the sun and eliminate Pluto, you've got 9 spheres and 9 levels of angels, by the way. So also Emanuel Swedenborg found that the third heaven was identical to what Dante discovered in the 3rd heaven, which was the Garden of Eden. That humans were living in the perfectly healthy, nude Garden of Eden state before the knowledge of good and evil which is the knowledge of judgment, was taken in, which is poison. So we have a consistency about Venus. We have Jesus referring to himself as the bright and morning star in Revelation, and which is the end of Revelation, which is where the prophecy refers to the coming of the tree of life. The tree of life is the tree that after the proverbial partaking of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the birth of conflict, because it's the birth of judgment. That's why Jesus said you shouldn't judge anything, because judgment is actually war. It's conflict. Human good is not good. And we think we're right and the other person's wrong. This knowledge of good and evil is actually trapped. In fact, Jesus actually told me this in this blinding vision where Christ appeared to me in Topanga Canyon in 1994 for the first time. And he continued to appear to me since then. So what I'm trying to show you is a vision that where the heavens are not as far away as you think. They're not as far away as you think. And that when Tesla said he was receiving a series of numerical tones and frequencies, that's exactly what's been happening on this very, very simple, very inexpensive radio that can be tuned to the sacred 432 megahertz or the 144.1 megahertz. So what we're finding is that if we can get participation, mass participation from participants like you, that the more people that join in together when we do these broadcasts, these transmissions to the planets every month, that the response will become more and more and more profound. Now, when we did the first transmission to the planet Mercury, which was on September the 24th, this past September the 24th, is not that long ago. Within a day and a half, I had the most blinding spiritual vision. Literally one of the 3 best experiences of my life. In the middle of the night at 2 in the morning, I go into this massively clear lucid dream where my physical vision was thousands of times more pristine than these eyes. So if I close these eyes, even now, I can't envision anything as beautiful as what happened. And what happened is I saw my wife, Crystal, who died on the 10th of August, the 9th or 10th of August this past year, sitting at a table in this forested building with this massive window behind it. Next to her was my good friend, Stephen Sipes, who was staying with me in my house at the time, and actually is a builder of a huge pyramid winery called Summerhill Wines in Kelowna, Arizona. So this man is very, very profound individual. And all of a sudden behind us, this massive tree of life is coming out of the sky. And this tree has a cloud around the top of it. It's flashing with lightning. And it settles upon us, and this blinding light rips out of the tree. And a voice says, which is really the voice of God, it says, I am the root of Abraham and David and Jesus. The root of the prophets. And it lifts me up out of my body. I literally physically thought I was dying. And I went into this sparkling, blinding light of God. And God's voice spoke and said, renew yourselves, renew the earth, the new earth. And then I was taken way, way up above the earth. And God showed me a vision of the tree of life coming back down. And you understand what the tree of life is. If you know the visions of the prophet Muhammad, if you know the Bible, if you know that the tree of life appears in the very, very end of the book of Revelation. Because when we took in the knowledge of good and evil from the rotten tree, the tree that causes us to judge each other, and that judgment would lead to all the wars and the destruction of our planet by egotistically each one of us believing we were right and the other person was wrong, or our religion was better than the other religion, or our interpretation of our religion was better than the other, because that's what good and evil does. It makes you think you're right and the other person's wrong. You know that song? I love that song. There ain't no good guy, there ain't no bad guy, there's only you and me, and we just disagree. So that's what the knowledge of good and evil did. It made us think that we were right. But in the end of this long proverbial mythology, where we would go to war with each other over thinking our God was right and the other one was wrong, you come to the tree of life, which is the very, very end. And in Islam, when the prophet goes through the 7 levels of heaven, the tree appears at the border between the 6th and the 7th heaven. So, and then the prophet the archangel Gabriel stops at the tree, and then he continues on. So God, to the 7th heaven, God took me and my wife, who is deceased on the other side, and took us above the tree in this blinding light where I thought I was actually dying. Now, this is only 33 hours after the transmission to Mercury, and Mercury is the messenger planet. In fact, if I take the speed of light in meters per second divided by the circumference of Mercury as this wavelength, I'm just a tad under 20 hertz. And that's where humans start hearing, hence the message. Mercury, the messenger, which is the closest to the sun, to the solar living presence of our solar system, which is alive and conscious. So what I'm saying is, and I know Santos apparently has been talking about the connection to consciousness and the planets, is that these planets are alive today. And when we send radio signals, because you're listening to a radio station or you're listening to a station on the internet, all those signals are earthbound signals. They bounce off satellites and they repeat around the globe, and they move through the internet. But nobody has done what Jimmy Blanchett and I are doing right now together before. In fact, it was only in 2008 when George Harrison, the legendary Beatles, died, and NASA sent his song to his guru Deva, the song is called Across the Universe. They sent it to the North Star. And it actually hasn't gotten there yet, because the North Star is over 200 light years away. So radio waves travel at the speed of light. But when we send a message on Jimmy's antenna, which is this beautiful, beautiful sacred geometry antenna, and I talked to Jimmy yesterday, and he now, Sacha, has an improvement to the antenna. There'll be no antenna like this on Earth. There will be 2 antennas in tandem, One will broadcast the message at 432 megahertz, and the other will broadcast the message at 144.1 megahertz. And the ratio between those two is 1 to the speed of light. And the speed of light is proprietary as its velocity in our dimension, 299,792.458 kilometers per second. So that's what we're doing. And now what we're trying to open up is, what are the messages that we want to send to the 9 planetary spheres with your participation? And your participation matters, because when you tune in to a live transmission, look, it only takes 4.3 minutes to send a transmission to Mercury, 6.1 minutes to Venus. You know, and the sun is 8.3 minutes, 8 minutes and 21 seconds. So the response you get is real. This is really, really tangible, is what I'm saying.
Very good. Thank you, David. Any thoughts on what David's talking about with respect to last week when we were together? And Jimmy Blanchett was, if you remember, using the moon as a bounce pad, and we sent that transmission to Venus. So David is saying that he has conclusive evidence that some kind of a channel or conduit was activated a week ago today when we made the transmission between his geolocation, presumably, and the planet Venus. So what, just in summary, Santos may or may not comment to it, because I know a great deal about Venus than most humans. What is the significance you see, David?
Well, I would say the significance is what our planet's going through right now, and that knock and you'll be heard, knock and the door will be open. The significance is that the whole planet is asleep, and they're going deeper and deeper into a sleep state. The global authorities are removing our freedom of speech, our freedom to communicate, our freedom of expression. They're stifling our children. They're stifling us. And I see this as a real, authentic call out into the solar system. So every month, we're going to move to the next planet, to the next planet, to the next planet, and sending out these broadcasts. And so we want your participation. We need your participation. We don't just want your participation.
Yeah, let me jump in. Okay, so that's the thing. I mean, with the syncretism society, it would seem, because what we're doing, this is the tip of the spear of collective first contact, which is what we're basically doing with hyperdimensional intelligences, with whatever's out there in the outer space or in there in the inner space. And we're using group plasma, ideation, projection, intention, using the moon as the bounce pad, using this incredibly beautifully conceived antennae system that Jimmy Blanchett has invented and built, which is harnessing messages, which we demonstrated in the media piece last week for anyone who wants to go back and look at that, how the pictograms are fed through. What's the machine that it's fed through, David, that codifies it into frequency? The images.
Yeah, Jimmy can take a picture, just like NASA sent this Arecibo message, years and years ago, and it gets encoded into a radio wave and is sent out, and any intelligences out there can receive it and actually look at the picture and read it. And so one of the messages included the longitude and latitude of most of the most profound ancient temples on the earth, the Great Pyramid included, and Chichen Itza, El Castillo, which, there are so many of them. So Jimmy gave them the coordinates, and that basically tells them that we understand what those sacred sites are, and we're sending this out to you. Plus, there was a lot of other messages in the pictogram, and sending out my child's eyes, who's 6 years old, was another pictogram. So just in the same way we're communicating now, actually, we're sending out pictures, motion pictures of ourselves through the internet. We can actually send these out directly into space. I mean, that would be a good question to ask Jimmy, is can we send a video, image, audio recorded message to one of the planets so they could see us? But what's very interesting about what happened to my radio today is that cannot happen. You see, if you have if you're driving down the highway and you're 100 miles from me, and we're both at 92.1 FM and we're listening to Led Zeppelin, we're both getting Led Zeppelin at the same time. So it's not possible for me to get Led Zeppelin in my office and not get it in my house 40 feet away. That's not possible. So that means the day we did the transmission, because I blasted my little podcast building here at 432 megahertz when I pushed the call button, which is in the same synchronistic moment that we sent out the transmission to Venus, there's a portal open in here now. And I can come in here at any time in the day and turn this on, and I might get a message from them. And it's almost like they knew I turned it on. As soon as I turned it on, they started chirping. I made a recording of it. I just can't get my share screen button to play right now, but and show it to you. But if you go to the website to register for the transmissions, you'll see all the videos on my site, and I believe you guys have your own link.
David, let's break it down, because I want feedback from Santos here. Forgive me.
Yeah.
We'll be sending messages to the various planets, the various celestial bodies. The question becomes, how should we be couching messages? What messages may find relevancy? If we're beaming, for instance, to Mercury, what does Mercury want to hear from us?
Well, first of all, these bodies are conscious beings, as we know. The Neoplatonists called them archangels, dominions, kingships, rulerships. They're all different stratified hierarchies of rulership. So if we're going to be sending messages to them, the messages should be of the kind of asking them permission to help us. They will help us unless we ask. So that's what a prayer means. To pray means to beseech. So these are our gods. They are our local gods. Mercury, Venus, they are what we call God or the gods, but they will not interfere or help us directly unless we ask them. It's like a little child who asks a parent unless he asks, or a guy who likes a girl, unless he asks her for her phone number, she's just not going to just give it to him. So that's the same with these planets.
Right.
They're intelligent. They know that we're trying to communicate with them. They know we can speak to them. But if we're using technology to talk to them, we would be, or should be, asking them to intervene in our lives, and they need our permission, or rather, they need us to make the first step. And once we do that, we are going to shift massively, because this is a big effort, to get in touch with these great gods who want to help us.
So you're talking about the fulmination of this. You're talking about the fulmination of this seeding of humanity is reaching its alchemical fulmination, and part of that process, of course, is a bifurcation, the separation of the wheat from the chaff, which is precisely what we're living through right now with this COVIDiocy, the masked and the unmasked, the light bearers and the naysayers. And we're just seeing that bifurcation happening.
Yep.
That's a process which, by best accounts, will happen for a short period of time,
Yeah.
whereupon we then move into conventional reconvention with our divine status. But that's about us elevating ourselves collectively once that bifurcation is complete, and in a sense, I want to watch my language here because there's a lot of bruised hearts around the world right now connected to what's going on with the so-called vaccination program. But it is all soul covenant stuff. And there is a bifurcation. There is a falling away. And those that are left, the meek inheriting the earth, so to speak, are the ones who catalyze a new electric frequency set, which does indeed move into reconvention with the Godhead that you're describing. So this is pure civilizational alchemy taking place.
Yeah.
So that makes a great sense to me.
Asking you, Chelsea, when Gomorrah was happening and Lot saw and distressed about Sodom and Gomorrah, he went up into the mountain and he said, God, he said, how can you destroy them? What if there's 10 good people there? And God is not destroy it. What about 2? We went down to none. And eventually he said, I have to destroy it because there are no decent people there. But
then Lot turned around and sees that they've turned into pillars of salt.
That's right, his wife. So, but the point is, there was an outcry. See, it says in the scripture that there was such an outcry about the perversity of Sodom and Gomorrah that God heard their voice and came down to see for himself. Now, of course, this is poetry, it's not literal, but it teaches you a truth. And in that, when we collectively, when we beseech these gods, the sun, Saint Michael, Saturn, Saint Ariel, when we beseech them, we now give them permission to help us. And they come down and look at our condition and feel pity for us. But if we don't ask, if we don't do what you're doing, trying to communicate with them, we're not going to get anywhere. So it's a great step forward. It's how we get their attention.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Santos, and I totally agree with you. And also to have reverence when we're approaching them, which is why I use the children's voices. And I think I got my screen to work now, Sasha. I think I know how to do
it. Good man. Okie doke. Let me see if I can bring you in.
So watch this. Let me go to.
I'm not seeing you. Oh, back up. I'm not seeing you in the room, so I don't know how you can share your screen. I would have to see you come up. In the green room, I should see your screen as an option to then bring you in, drop you in to the broadcast. I'm not seeing that.
Okay, so let me see. It says share screen or window, entire screen, and then allow. No, it's still not letting me do it. Okay, I don't know what this is doing. So, but anyway, I really think that there's so much evidence that the consciousness, in fact, even if you look at, this is in the book of Isaiah. This is one of the arguments that was brought up recently, that in the book of Isaiah, it says that Lucifer was cast down from the bright morning star. So therefore, the bright morning star isn't good. No, that's not true. See, Lucifer in Isaiah was cast down from the bright morning star because that's probably where God at that time had a throne stationed. Stationed on Venus. Why? Because it's right next door where the gods can be watching humanity from right next door. And that Lucifer was cast down. This is in the book of Isaiah from the bright morning star. And therefore Jesus in 22:16 in Revelation, which is getting the end of Revelation, identifies himself as the root of the prophet of David, which is what happened to me with the tree of life. The tree of life and the blinding light that came out of the tree was many times brighter than our sun, identified itself as the root of Abraham and David and Jesus and the prophets. So therefore, the transmission worked, is what I'm saying. There's no way I could have had that experience if we didn't do the transmission. And we have multiple people who have written in who also had incredible experiences within 3 days of the transmission. But we had so few participants because people don't know how powerful this is. There's so much fear in our culture. We've created so much fear. I mean, what if you invoke the wrong beings, people tell me. Well, that's why you send out your intention. And believe me, the Supreme Being knows all of our languages. You could send out a message using any language on earth, and I guarantee you it's well understood. It would be well understood. You don't have to speak in a Vedic language or an early Hebrew language like Aramaic. You can send out the message, and it sets a portal up. And once the portal between the transmitter and the target is open, you can go in that space and communicate anytime you want. And if you understand that Jesus is calling himself the bright and morning star, and the end of Revelation, which is the end of a prophecy, that means that's where God will be stationed, at the bright and morning star. And that's Venus. That is the bright and morning star. The Bible's written in code.
What is the next objective? What is the next objective? What are we doing next with the moon bounce transmission with Jimmy? What's planned? Because I think it might be a good idea to get Santos's Syncretism Society. He's a bunch of brilliant astrologians and magicians as part of his collegiate, and I think it would be a good thing for you guys to look at this and maybe help determine the nature of the message that we're going to transmit.
For sure.
That's what needs to happen. We need a message.
David, let him just explore this idea.
Yeah, the more groups of conscious bodies around the earth get to know of this and join, the bigger will be. Remember the Sodom and Gomorrah outcry. The more we beseech these gods, and Venus is a benefic, so you can't fail. These people who say, "Oh, what if you attract the wrong?" You cannot, not with Venus. Venus is a benefic. Maybe with Mars, yes, but Jupiter and Venus and the Sun, you will never ever get any malevolence. So, beaming to the Sun, Venus, Jupiter, I would strongly recommend. Mercury as well, definitely. But the moment we do that, and there's more of us, I know that the syncretism world, they'll be behind it 100%. So that's one group. Now, there's Sacha's group, the New Earth Nation. There's other groups, and it's time that we all come together, and we are. We can see people now that are so disparate in their ways of thinking and their religions, but they are coming together to fight this monstrous demon that is trying to take over the world with its, lockdowns and what have you. And so we see now disparate organizations are actually coming together. So the more we bring this to people's attention, and the more people are involved in it with their hearts, the more these planets will communicate with us, these gods, and we will give them permission, and it's all over.
So let me just raise a slight conundrum here. If you check, I believe, in Wikipedia still, what the biggest event that ever occurred on Earth was, certainly a few short years ago, it would tell you that it was the harmonic convergence, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the 16th of August 1987. Now, that of course was catalyzed largely by my erstwhile now deceased friend, the reincarnated high priest of the Mayans, Valon Votan or Pacal Votan, Sky, you know who I'm talking about. Jose Arguelles. And when I asked Jose, when he came to stay with me a year or two before he died in 2011, of course, he was the man, this is for the audience's edification, he was the man who decoded the long count Tzolk'in of the Mayans in the 70s, and then determined that 21st of December 2012 was, until 21st of December 2020, was effectively the end of time. So we just reached that apogee in the last few months at the end of last year, 21st of December 2020, which of course was where the rainbow serpent kind of issued from Uluru and then is now hitting Mexico around about now, isn't it? I think this part of the world, which is why the energy is so vibrant here.
Yep.
But the point I'm trying to make is this. When I asked Jose Arguelles, and I said, well, you're the man, you're the reincarnation of the last of the Mayan high priests. You're the man who decoded the long count Tzolk'in in the 70s. You're the man who put the biggest meme in history. When 2012 goes down in Wikipedia as being the biggest meme in history as well. 2 gold stars to Jose Arguelles there. I said, you triggered that meme and you triggered the harmonic convergence in 1987. What was going on in 1987? Because it was a well-known phenomenon at the time that the First Nation peoples all around the earth, from Papua New Guinea to the Amazon Basin to the Kalahari Desert to the deserts in North Africa, the First Nation peoples, the medicine men, the shaman, the oracles, the viziers, essentially all stood up at midday on that day and they saluted the sky. What the fuck was going on that day? How were these First Nation peoples living in forests and deserts and mountains communicating through the psionic morphogenetic network, and all of them on that day standing up and saluting the sky? And I asked Jose Arguelles, please just explain that piece to me. He said, oh, that's very simple. He was holding his wand. I remember. He said, oh, that's very simple. He said, we all knew, we were all connected through the one form of communication under universal gaze. We all knew that that was the day demarcated the beginning of the journey of the end of time. But the point being, he said, that was the date line that the ancient wisdom keepers knew they had to stand up and tell our space brothers and sisters that we have come of age. The point I'm making here is that and no more fucking intervention. Thank you. No more abductions. No more splicing and dicing. No more hybridization programs. Thank you. That, he told me, was the point. That the collective morphogenetic Adamite was standing up and going, we've come of age, now we can take it from here. So my question now is this. Should we, David, be sending out transmissions that are appealing and saying, please help us? Because for me, this doesn't jive with me.
I see what you mean. I see where you're going. Yeah, I see where you're going.
Right. I feel that maybe we need to dial up and speed and step up this transmission agenda, and we should be not asking for help, but we should be laying claim, and we should be standing and letting these godly elements know what we want.
Yep.
I like what you're saying, Sacha. Yeah, because by asking for help, we're looking so weak, but also we're letting them know we're here. We're letting them know the condition of our planet. But you're right. We appear so weak, as like a beggar. And Jesus said, you are as gods. That we are all as gods and goddesses. But so we have to take our voice and send it to the cosmos and ring each planet like a giant gong.
Good.
And say, humanity is awakening. We're sending our voices out to the cosmos instead of just sending songs and news broadcasts to each other down here. We're now recognizing, we know you're out there. And I want to show you something, Santos, that's really incredible. This is an incredible piece of data in the recent Navy testimony of these mysterious UFOs, okay? So one piece of data is that Sean Cahill, who I've tried to get on with Sacha, he's a really far-out kind of incredible man who was on the USS Princeton. They noticed on radar that the UFOs they were tracking disappeared just north of Guadalupe Island, where there was this magnetic anomaly. And that happens to be the same north latitude as the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And the north latitude of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, if you convert degrees, minutes, and seconds to 10 base, is a representation of the speed of light in metric. So that is an interesting piece of data. But there's something even more interesting in regards to 432. Because remember, Jimmy and I got the download. If you take the 432 divided by the 1441, you get the speed of light in metric. Now watch this. Kevin Day, who is a radar operator on the USS Princeton, said they suddenly tracked the UFO jump 60 miles in 1 second. And guess what 60 miles in 1 second is? It's an octave of 432. It's 216,000 miles an hour. 216,000 miles an hour times an octave is 432,000 miles an hour. Because an octave is times 2. So 216 times 2 is 432. So that means these UFOs are jumping in some type of a 432 harmonic. That's what it means. And even though 216,000 miles an hour is ludicrous speed, I can't believe they didn't notice this. Nobody in the Navy did the calculation. 60 miles in a second is 216, because 60 times 60 times 60 is 216,000 miles an hour. So times an octave. And in music, an octave is you take a frequency and you times 2 to go up. So A, 440 hertz, which is wrong, times 2 is 880 hertz. If I go down, it's 220. But the correct A note has been demonstrated that the French used to use in the early days was 432. So what I'm telling you is these UAPs are jumping in a 432 octave. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us a lot. And there's nobody in ufology who have figured this out. It tells us they're real, they're here, they're tangible, they're highly tuned to 432. And that's the frequency of the broadcast, and that's the frequency my radio was at this morning, when I was in the house and I videotaped, and it was perfectly quiet, and as soon as I got in here, it just started chirping like mad. And so I think we're on to something. And some of the return messages that come to us are incredibly sophisticated. They're not simple messages like, yeah, we're here, our ships are going to fly overhead, which Jimmy has also documented, and we're going to help you guys out. It's not really like that. It's not like, and like Sacha, like you're saying, there are groups of ETs, the Zetas, that have abducted human beings, studied our DNA, tried to create hybrids because they can't feel emotions the way we feel emotions. They're cerebral. They don't know how to feel pain and frustration and love, and they're very interested in humans and our ability to have these incredible emotions. So they've been trying to create a hybrid, and the way they're doing it is very, very unethical. But we're talking about beings that are much higher vibration than that. The fourth, when you send out harmonic frequency transmissions, you're going to attract harmonics in return. And a harmony, when we send out radio signals, we send them out at one frequency at a time. And when radio astronomers, even at SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, when they scan the heavens, they're looking at one frequency at a time. But what Jimmy's new insight is, that came out of the download, is we're now going to send out the message at a ratio of 432 to 144:1, which is a ratio of 1 to the speed of light. And that, I can't wait till we see what happens when we do this. So we need, when I say we want, Santos and Sacha, is recordings in your voices that are 1 minute long each. And you can do 3 messages, but Jimmy has to cool his amp down. So he runs a 1 minute message, cools his power supplies down for a minute, and then sends out another message, right? So we have to decide what the messages are. You're right, Sacha. I love what you're saying. It's an incredible insight you're having and you're sharing, Sacha. Is we shouldn't be like beggars and saying, "Oh, please come help us." We're so we're so weak. Our weakness is our fear. Our fear of death is the, ultimate fear that we all have to conquer. Why are we so willing to lay down and let them put the chains around our wrists in our lives? Why are we so afraid that there's nothing else out there and everything out in the universe is somehow coming to get us, and we can't trust anybody? Even Stephen Hawking said recently, be careful about sending messages into space because you might really attract somebody, which means he's acknowledging there's somebody out there.
That's a fact.
But
I spent a little time with Stephen Hawking. It was one of the weirdest and most wonderful and weirdest experiences of my life, when you're in a room alone having a conversation with the cleverest man alive, and it takes him about 43 minutes to answer in one sentence. But he's looking at you with these eyes, and you're speaking, and you're going red and tripping over yourself. And he's just looking at you with these eyes, and you know that this fierce intelligence is scanning every fucking syllable. Anyway, that was a long time ago. But look, I'm liking where this is going. So I think we can work on that. We can work on a full-bodied, dropped balls message to the cosmos, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think we can definitely work on that. What about
What
timelines?
about, Sacha, what about some of the people you just mentioned, like the harmonic convergence creator? Is he still alive?
No, he died in 2011. Jose Arguelles.
Jose did. And you know about Kalman, right? Johann Kalman, who
Well, we could ask Lynn McTaggart with the intention experiments. I'm so loosely in touch with her. And also, I don't know if Professor Roger Nelson with the Global Consciousness Project at Princeton, which I was involved with 20 years ago. I think that's still going, but there are some.
Oh, I know Roger. I know him personally.
Well, there you go. So ask Roger, and I can reach out to Lynn McTaggart with the intention experiment, and we can see if we can unify those groups. Simon Parks has already said he doesn't want to participate because he thinks the 144 is a devilish number. So hit that one on the head. But I can give it some thought. Any ideas, anyone here, networks out there that might want to participate?
The question is from another angle. If we have contactees, that's one method to send out messages and to get response. But we have also contactees from Venus, from any kind of, and that could be also a possibility to get intel about this experiment.
Yeah,
what they say about that.
That's a good idea. So yeah, that's a good idea. Contactees maybe would have a very visceral instinct about what.
Yeah, and they can ask like Elena Danan or whoever.
Well, Alex Collier.
He's the best.
Well, I spoke with him. Do you know Alex? Do you know
I know
Alex?
who he is. I know who Alex is.
He's the Andromedan contactee, of course, and who brought to Earth after his contact with the Andromedans, which went on for a long time. I don't know if it's still going on. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago because he was sitting in Laura Eisenhower's car when they were driving away from a conference, and she was on the phone with me, and she mentioned that Collier was sitting next to her. I almost choked because I've wanted to speak to that man for 20 years. Now I managed to then, but we can try and inveigle him because he's got direct contact with the Andromedans in that sense. He's the guy who brought back this message from the Andromedans, which has affected my life since I first heard it. And for me, it's the gold standard in consciousness and sovereignty, which is the pain that you feel is the love that you withhold.
Alex was in Topanga Canyon in the same years I was living there in a giant yurt when Christ was appearing to me in blinding light in Topanga Canyon in my yurt, and Alex was having his experiences. And then there was the Topanga Canyon UFO wave where the military helicopters were flying through Topanga Canyon. And I interviewed a college professor from Santa Monica College who saw the whole thing happening from his deck in Topanga. there was a lot going on in those days in the early 90s in that little cove. And so, yeah, there's also the idea of censor. So the Roger Nelson and the Global Consciousness Project, he appeared in my film, The Voice, and we did a whole segment on it. And the random event generators, it would be interesting to see if there's an increase in their coherency when we do a transmission.
Very good.
I want to note something really important, and that is that the Tesla-Schumann resonance on both of our recent transmissions, within hours of the transmission, the Tesla-Schumann resonance spiked at record high levels within hours of both transmissions. And I find that incredible. Also, we have the volcanoes going off, that is, the two of them have spiked. There's 3 volcanoes that have suddenly spiked, one in the Canary Islands, which is very, precarious situation that have happened, within synchronistic. You can't necessarily say that's a response, but there is a synchronicity to the timing of our August 8th transmission. We did a couple of transmissions after that to Jupiter and Saturn with my wife's music, and then we sent the one to Mercury and then Venus. So the dates on those are September 24th, and Mercury we did with you. I'm sorry, Venus we did with you very recently.
David, I just want to finish the earlier chain of thought, which is who we're going to invite in to participate in this. So I can reach out to Stephen Bassett, who heads up the Paradigm Research Group, and he's the leader of the sort of exopolitics and has recognized, even at intergovernmental level, and he's a mate of mine. And Stephen might be a very good guy to bring into this.
Well, Stephen knows me really well. He's been in my house. He's met my wife. He's
very good.
Eaten at my table. So yeah, I love Stephen. He's an incredibly amazing guy. Yes, he's more amazing than you can see in the media. He's way more
except he's a very brilliant man, except he's a fucking Democrat, which is unforgivable. But Michael Salla, what about Michael Salla?
Well, I love Michael Salla. Look, these are all people I know from my UFO days and speaking at conferences. I know Michael Salla is incredibly knowledgeable about the different races and probably could tell us a lot about the Venusians. And also
Elena Danin, I've not heard of her. Denan. Elena Denan.
She's a friend of Alex Collier.
I've never heard of her. Okay, I thought I knew them all. Well, Laura's a given. I can bring. So why don't we do that? Why don't we just really get the full coterie of all the people who are really at the front of this kind of, pushing the envelope in reconvention of cosmogenesis. We have access to all of these people. We know them all variously. And why don't we get everyone to input frequency-wise into a unified message, and then send that? You can play the mandolin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Or the mouth.
All right. I like the idea of doing that, because then David, they'll bring their networks in, and we can set up a big show on a particular date line, and then Jimmy and you can trigger the moon bounce live. We'll do a live broadcast and have all those folks on a panel, and even some mathematicians, or Shanaz, invite Shanaz in as well, our NASA rocket scientist. It'd be very interesting to do that, because that's one way of convening a hell of a lot of people around the world, multidisciplinary, into a group intention. But it would be a very conscious grouping of people. And I think that's important.
Yeah, for sure.
What about voices? Like, I even thought of having my friend Dan Aykroyd record a 1-minute message. I wonder if he would do it. I mean, what about whose voices should we send out there? And
that's obvious. Greta Thunberg, obviously.
Or just no name. Should we just use people who send us in, or should we open up the table and say, send us in a 1-minute recording, and we'll pick, ones that are.
That's a good idea. It's possible to have a little app thing on the website where people can just record their voices in 5 seconds, all saying the same thing. So we come up with what that line is, and then thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world. We can do Insta and Facebook and social media campaign, and they literally press the cursor onto that button. It records their voice saying that line, and we amass that and then compress that like 10,000 voices from around the world.
Wow, I love what they say. We are humanity, and we just hear that in different voices and different languages.
Yeah, let's work out what that message should be, but that could be a really fun way of doing it. Okay.
Well, I love that idea. And put some music in the background and just have them say, like you said, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, and we just have all these beautiful voices looped in, and we start sending it out.
Very good. And I do know Jimmy Page. You know that, don't you?
Oh no!
Well,
really?
But the thing is, can you imagine Kashmir at the front of that? Right?
My favorite song of all time.
There you go. All right. Well, look, that brings us up to the top of the hour. 1 hour and 1 minute and 16 seconds. So I think that's bringing us to the end. David, last comments or thoughts before we wind this down?
Well, the most important thought is understanding, and Santos brought this up, is tuned coherency. So it's like any of these global events, when you get synchronistic, where we're all coming together and we're all doing the transmission at the same time and participating. Those participants are, you see, there's a part of a radio wave that carries consciousness. And I've really been able to identify what that is with some experiments that I've done recently. And again, when you tune your radio to 97.1 FM or whatever it is, your whole car is vibrating at that frequency, and everybody in it, because your spine's made of calcium, and calcium is a conductor. It's a metal. So you're all vibrating at that frequency. So try to understand that it's not just about the messages we record and we send out. Your consciousness, your living presence becomes part of the transmission. That's the most important part, is when it goes out there, it has a feeling to it. It has a vibrational human presence feeling to it. I remember this as a kid, in my parents' car. I was born in 1961, and I remember when I got my first radio, there was a feeling when we were all tuned into those frequencies, listening to our favorite, music, and if you liked listening to Walter Cronkite, there was a vibe, and that vibe was our togetherness at that frequency. So don't think, oh no, I don't have to participate. These guys can just do this, and I'll just dabble on the internet all day. Really get off your seat and really stay in touch with Sacha's team, and let's do this together, because it's really real. This is really real stuff. It's not pie in the sky stuff. So that's the last thing I have to say.
That's beautiful. Very reminiscent, speaking of those radio back in the 70s. I was also listening to my radio under my duvet, jacking off to Karen Carpenter. No, it wasn't her. It was Linda Ronstadt. That was the one.
That's the one.
Now, Karen Carpenter, you'd be crying your eyes out.
Yeah.
No.
Not going to work.
Last thoughts, Santos.
Well, so we serve the gods. There's no doubt about that. But the gods serve us. In the Babylonian language, the sun is called Shamesh, and that means servant. Every day, the risen Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Son, Saint Michael, serves us. It gives us light, photosynthesis. It gives us vitality. They are our servants. So we don't need to go begging them. Yes, as I pay respect to Sacha and all these people, they pay respect to me. We serve each other. Everyone is in service to each other. There's no reason for us to think that the sun is so much bigger than us, that it is so much better, and that we need to beg it and beseech it. It's more like a diplomatic commissioning of them to intervene and help us, because they have that power. They are our servants. The sun is our servant. All we need to do is ask it. Simple.
Beautiful. Sacha, any thoughts? Any closing thoughts with the three louche males running the commentary for the last hour? Yeah, sure I am. Yeah, you're absolutely on the spot. You need to broadcast your voice.
Oh my goodness. I don't know that I honestly have that much to share. I think it's a really beautiful idea to have a lot of people communicating and really setting an intention, you know, because for me I feel that, again, I always come back to the same thing. I feel that a lot of people get very excited about doing certain things, but they haven't done their own personal work. And I think it's so important not to just say, hey, we're going to have contact and communicate, but how do we really create a very strong foundation so that higher vibratory beings actually look at us respectfully and go, wow.
That's good. I like that.
This is significant, rather than who are these arrogant guys that think that, you know, they're going to just tell us, oh, we are so enlightened that we demand you to do whatever it is, you know. That there has to be a level of humbleness, and I feel that humanity really needs to continue doing their internal work to get to that vibratory level, to be able to have natural communication with these beings. And I think it's all about that resonance, and that communication will happen naturally more and more and more as we start to vibrate and resonate with
them. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much indeed. I like that. My closing thought is the same thing I've been repeating ad nauseum for some time, which is also reflective of what Santos was saying earlier, and you even intimated it, David, which is that if the prayer is fashioned aright, it'll be answered by the God in your own heart. And to that end, one thing I have learned in my life is that there is no limit. There's no limit to anything ever. We are, by distinction, limitless. We have the capacity to either cloister our lives and narrow our focus into the most infinitesimal and banal mediocrity as a sentient being, that we can become that shitty little petty tyrant working in a post office, making everyone else feel like shit because of the look on our face, and because our own psychosexual essence is so constricted and so defeated. And we see that all of us, everywhere we go in life, right? Era of covidiocy, we're seeing the mediocrity and the banality of our civilization floating to the surface, like the sewage shit that it is and always has been. It's just that now we see it. We're seeing these horrid little in our society hurting the vulnerable, the weak, the infirm, the old, and apparently enjoying the process. We're seeing them swagger around in airports and in nightclubs and restaurants and supermarkets and wearing costumes and badges, and apparently really enjoying the living out that fantasy of petty tyranny. And that's all good and all fine. But the point is that is when we narrow the lens of our divinity to the lowest aperture. On the other hand, when we're going with the flow of our supernature, genius, and with our, dare I say it, our fully released orgasm, we are then able to move into such extraordinary creative flow and prosperity and abundance and limitlessness in our capacity to manifest, ideate, create, conjure into this world. To my mind, that's where we belong. We belong with no boundaries, least of all healthy boundaries, which I've always said are the fucking worst boundaries. Very noxious to someone like me to even think in terms of boundaries. We need to transmute and transcend even the idea of boundaries. One understands how that served us in our infancy. But really, I stand fully and squarely on the red soil. And I believe that I carry humility as something of a realized human. But at the same time, I will demand that the angel and the demon take the knee to me in this world. This is my world. This is my world. And my will be done. My will is in convention with thy will. And that's why I lay claim to that. If I didn't, I would be dead before dawn.
Amen.
So I'll leave it at that and thank the audience. We've got about 240 odd people on this channel, which means we've got about 1,000 people looking in. No notice at all, guys. Thank you. We're broadcasting, I think, on 3 or 4 here. And by the morning, there'll be a very big audience will have watched this. And I hope a great many of you will have learned some useful stuff from what we're doing. No, we are not dabbling with the demons. Go back to your rosaries and your Catholic nonsense. We are standing stripped naked here as a humanity, and we are doing what we are divinely anointed and appointed to do, which is to ask questions and to be curious. So thank you for joining us all. David, Sereda, love to you, brother, and thank you very much again. Santos, it's such a joy having you here. Sacha, thank you for the last few days of your beautiful company. And thank you to our audience. Yes, people. Whoop. Whoop. All right. Much love, David. We'll be in touch in the week.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
All right. God bless you. Bye-bye.